After a thrilling Game 7 victory over the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Boston Bruins are right back at it, kicking off their second round series against the Florida Panthers. Let's preview that series with Armando Velez of Locked On Florida Panthers.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things spoke to be. Today is Monday, May 6th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your buds. Download Monopoly Go now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go. Speaking of game on, puck drops tonight on Game 1 of the second round playoff series between the Boston Bruins and Florida Panthers. I dropped a quick bonus pod on Sunday discussing Game 7, David Pastrnak's heroics, Hampus Lindholm's fine play to set it up, Jeremy Swayman being unbelievable. Do go and listen to that if you haven't already. And please do subscribe to the pod if you have not already on your favorite app and on YouTube. Today, we're talking to Armando Velez of Locked On Florida Panthers to preview this upcoming series. Quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me, my dad jokes, hockey thoughts at Ian C. McLaren. I'm a lifelong Bruins fan, been covering this team for various outlets for about 20 years. Super excited to get into another second round playoff series, a rematch of last year's upset by the Panthers over the Bruins. Let's get into everything you need to know here with Armando Velez of Locked On Florida Panthers. All right, for the second year in a row, we've got Bruins, Panthers in the playoffs. This time it's in the second round, and very glad to be joined and to catch up with Armando Velez of Locked On Panthers. We're going to preview this podcast here for you, and let's start with key storylines. Armando, Bruins fans who didn't pay much attention to the other Atlantic series, what's the story down there with the Panthers through one round of the playoffs?
Yeah, not just second year in a row, Ian. Third time in this rivalry and in the history of these two franchises that these two are facing up against each other too.
Yep.
So it's creating a little bit of history between the two franchises now. But biggest storyline for the Florida Panthers is really how they were able to just shut down the star players of the Tampa Bay Lightning, Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, and doing it with their depth coming to play, because in the beginning of the series, Ryan Lomberg got sick, and then Sam Bennett got hurt in the series too, in Game 2 against Tampa Bay. So they've had to deal with a little bit of the injury bug in this series going on. I mean, it's very minor for the Panthers, but they were able to get through and get an early series, because once puck drop of Game 1 happens, it'll be 6 full days off for the Panthers last time they took the ice in a game setting. They've had 2 off days, 2 practice days, off day, and they were just back at practice today for the Panthers. So they are chomping at the bit to get back on the ice. And for this time around, they're going into the series knowing who their goaltender is, versus last time around, Alex Lyon got them into the postseason, and then Bobrosky came in Game 3 and then finished off that series for the Panthers. So that's really the big storyline coming into this one for the Florida Panthers. How about on the Boston Bruins side of things?
I mean, obviously, yeah, they have a very quick turnaround here between round 1 and Game 1 of round 2. Game 7 just happened on Saturday night. The Bruins traveled to Florida on Sunday, so not really much practice time or anything to regroup. The big storyline, of course, from the first series was just the play of Jeremy Swayman. You mentioned the goaltending and how Florida's was a bit unsettled last season before Bobrosky took over and ran with it all the way to the Cup final. the Bruins, of course, last year, they went with the Vezina winner in Linus Ullmark and stuck with him until Game 7. And after a couple rough goes in Game 5 and Game 6 this year, they started off with the rotation, but not to say Linus Ullmark didn't play well. He did in the loss in Game 2 to the Leafs. Jeremy Swayman was unbelievable. He had a 950 save percentage against the Maple Leafs. Yeah, they were missing William Nylander for a few games. Austin Matthews clearly had something going on. But, they still had Mitch Marner in every game, John Tavares, Morgan Riley. They still have a lot of firepower, a lot more finishers than the Bruins had. And for Jeremy Swayman to have that kind of success rate, that was the biggest storyline for sure. Health-wise, the Bruins are pretty healthy. They didn't have any they just had a couple minor injuries in the first round. Depth defenseman Andrew Peeke went out. He could be back as early as game 1 against the Panthers. Danton Heinen was a bit banged up, but knock on wood, their key players were able to stay healthy, and they're kind of have a problem here where they're going to have so many healthy bodies. It'll cause some lineup changes. But yeah, goaltending was a big story.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, for Game 7, it was David Pastrnak after being called out by Jim Montgomery.
What
in
a story.
Game 6. Yeah, they said they need more from Pasta, and he came through in the biggest of ways in overtime. So, that's probably the biggest one as well is just his response after being called out by the head coach.
Yeah. And speaking of availability, Sam Bennett, he'll be out of Game 1 for the Panthers against the the Panthers against the Bruins, excuse me, which Matthew Tkachuk also spoke about. This was a series that he was expecting for it to happen based on how the series was going. Yeah. But I wonder if he was just saying that for the just for the public, or if he would have said it if it was the other way around with the Maple Leafs winning the series. I don't know. It's just maybe a little bit of respecting your opponent, which I like out of Matthew Tkachuk too.
Yeah.
But he had 9 points in round 1 for the Panthers. And it's crazy because for the Panthers, it's weird how this all worked out with Game 82 with Boston at home against Ottawa, and then Florida against Toronto in Game 82 on that Tuesday, April 16th, but also there's a travel benefit for both teams in actuality, which actually really helped to, home ice. It obviously is going to be a factor for both for the Panthers, especially getting this now starting in South Florida. But I mean, rest for the Panthers was big, getting these 6 days off. And I know it's a quick turnaround for the Boston Bruins, but it was still a quick trip in that round 1 for them too. So true. And how are you feeling? I want to ask you, because last year the Panthers, when they won Game 7 in Boston, they went straight to Toronto 2 days later. They're packing for 3 days.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about the rest versus rust? Because in the Panthers side of things, they got rest in between the second round against Toronto to the Eastern Conference Final, and then up to 9 days off in the Eastern Conference Final to the final. But that was later in the series. It's a little different this time around for them, and because you're not getting you're setting the tone in the series with your style of play and the hitting, which both teams have had multiple high hitting games in their first round series. But how are you feeling about the rest versus rust with what the Panthers have versus the Bruins going into round 2?
I mean, yeah, I think the Bruins are going to come in a little tired, but like I said, they do have some reinforcements they can use if some guys are banged up. I think it kind of benefits them to come in right after this game against the Maple Leafs. The emotions are high. They're, excited to try to reverse the script from last season. Having blown 2-3-1 series leads in consecutive years, that would have made history. They already made history last year by, losing in the first round after that amazing regular season. They didn't want to repeat that. And, we'll talk about this in key stats later on, maybe, but the Bruins were 4-0 against the Panthers in the regular season. So I'm not sure they're, too worried about being overtired. I think they're going to get up for this one. Coming up here as the podcast continues, we're going to break down some key players to keep an eye on and look at some key stats as well, make our predictions, and we'll get to that here as this special crossover preview episode of Locked On Bruins and Panthers continues. All right, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your ride, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and the eBay Guaranteed Fit is available only to U.S. customers. All right, thanks so much once again for making Locked On Panthers, Locked On Bruins your part of your daily routine. Just as a reminder, you can check out the Locked On Sports Today channel, which is streaming 24/7 over on YouTube and on the Amazon Fire TV channels app. News, opinions, analysis from all over the sports world. Locked On Sports Today, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. And here tonight, it's Panthers Bruins game 1. It was interesting, Armando. I was thinking how last season the Bruins were coming in with a Vezina Trophy candidate in Linus Ullmark, Selke Trophy candidate and Patrice Bergeron. Now, of course, you look at the Panthers. Bobrosky's up for the Vezina. Barkov is rightfully up for the Selke. Who are some other guys that have kind of stepped up for the Panthers that maybe are kind of, flying a bit under the radar?
Yeah, and just announced today that Alexander Barkov was named a finalist for the Selke, likely the favorite to win it, with Austin Matthews and Jordan Stahl also part of that mix. But for the Panthers, I mean, I think the typical guys are going to be performing, like the Matthew Tkachuks, who likes to get in the face of the other of the opposition. Carter Verhaeghe, who can shoot it from in different parts of the ice for the Panthers. Alexander Barkov, but the other guys that I want to point out to you, Ian, to step up are a few guys. Gustav Forsling, who plays in all situations. He was a +5 in round 1. I know for in the NHL national landscape, the underrated talk has been a lot with Sasha Barkov, but honestly, the most underrated Panther is likely Gustav Forsling. What he does on both ends, can also play on your power play too if necessary for the team. And just is an even strength machine for them. I mean, he's always on the ice, and especially with the Panthers having the last change for most of these games, you're gonna see Gustav. You saw Gustav Forsling on Nikita Kucherov when he was in the previous series. You're likely gonna see that when David Pastrnak hits the ice, especially because that is the most dangerous man on the ice for Boston. Anton Lundell is the same thing for that, especially because the Panthers do have the center depth advantage here for in this series, in my opinion. So it's going to be important to see how guys like an Anton Lundell perform in this, as he's stepped up. So now everyone is moving up a line for the Panthers in this series. And I mentioned this on my Friday show that I don't think they can. I don't know if they can survive the whole series without Sam Bennett, because he's just a very underappreciated player as far as like the identity of this team, as far as like the grit after the whistle, gaining the zone, taking a key face off for the Panthers. That's going to be important for them. So health is going to be crucial for him. And also Sergei Bobrosky, even though the structure of the Panthers defense is prevents the puck to get down the middle, and Bobrosky has a lot of time. He has definitely been save percentage wise, not the best series for him, but made the crucial saves at the very important time. Game 2 against Matt Dumba especially was one that really stuck out in that whole series. It's just they're selling pucks of the Bobbery in Pantherland there. So he's been very timely in that. And I'm guessing and for the Boston Bruins side of things, I mentioned center depth, as which Coyle and Zaka, no goals. I believe they moved one of them to the wing now.
That's true. Yep.
And so I want to ask you, what is now, is that part of the key players to watch in this series for you?
I mean, yeah, definitely. Both Charlie Coyle and Pavel Zacha had been their top 2 centers all season long, and obviously they had big shoes to fill with Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci retiring. Both of those players, Coyle and Zacha, had career years, and if you look at the numbers, they combined outproduced what Bergeron and Krejci did last season offensively. Obviously, there's certain intangibles that those 2 retired players brought that you can't replace. And like you mentioned, Pavel Zacha had been moved to the wing in Game 7 with Morgan Geekie stepping up and serving as a center on that line. Both of those guys only had a couple assists each in the series against the Toronto Maple Leafs. They need to get going. They need to, not to say they didn't play well and they weren't effective. Obviously, they had some tough defensive assignments trying to lock down Toronto's big guns, and you had other guys step up offensively. The secondary scoring was there for the Bruins in the first round, and Trent Frederick, Jake Bobrosky each had a few goals. But those guys in particular, yeah, it's going to be a challenge with the center depth that the Panthers have. But those 2 guys definitely need to step up. I was talking to Gil Martin on the national show here on Monday as well, and I mentioned a couple younger guys who have really stepped up for the Bruins, who I think could be key players in this series. One is Mason Lohrei on the blue line, the first player ever born in the state of Louisiana to appear in the Stanley Cup playoffs. This guy is pretty fearless out there, and he's not afraid to take some big swings, some big moves. In his playoff debut, he came very close to scoring between the legs on the Leafs. Very good mobile defenseman, and he's just absolutely fearless out there. Brad Marchand compared him to himself when he came in as a rookie in 2011. Just that kind of, not scared to be there, ready to embrace the role. And another guy is Justin Brazeau, who has all the tools in the world to be a goal scorer. He scored 61 goals in his last season of junior hockey, kind of bounced around the ECHL, the AHL, finally got a chance. And he was very good for the Bruins before getting injured late in the regular season. And he looked pretty dangerous in Game 7 and had a couple good opportunities. These are the kind of guys that I look at in terms of finding playoff success, kind of those you need, Armando, you need guys contributing on every single line to succeed in the playoffs. And these are the kind of sneaky players that can really chip in. So those 2 guys I'm looking at, obviously Brad Marchand. You mentioned Matthew Tkachuk, how he likes to mix it up. Marchand really got into it last series with Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi. He's ready to step up in that way. David Pastrnak, hopefully that goal in Game 7 will give him some added confidence. And Charlie McAvoy, I think, really needs to have a bit better series as well. He looks really hesitant out there, trying to maneuver the puck, set things up, just get the pucks on net, and good things will happen. So those are a few guys that I'm looking to. I wanted to ask you about Anton Lundell specifically. I think I asked you this earlier this year as well. I've got that guy in a keeper fantasy hockey league. It's a salary cap league. I know he's an RFA. If he's the kind of guy that needs to step into the top 6 to be productive, or can he chip in kind of anywhere he's playing?
Middle, not necessarily on the top line, but anywhere in the middle six, he's effective. And the fact that he's playing with the guys that he's used to in Lusterinen and Reinhardt, that's definitely they know each other's games, and that goes back to 2 seasons ago. So it's definitely it's a group that he's definitely used to playing with. So and it's crazy because even with the lines, going back to a few training camps ago, I mean, you see Barkov or Hagee going back all the way to 2021, and now they're back together after he was with Bennett and Kachuk, and now Paul Maurice tried something in Game 5 when it was 0-0 of switching up the lines and putting them in a blender, not in a blender, excuse me, but just mixing them up a little bit. And then that got the spark going, and those are the same lines that continued for the Panthers going into their fair share of practices right before this. So the signs always indicated that Lundell was going to be playing in the second line to at least start the series. So it's going to be interesting how the lines are going to look once he does return, because we've seen Evan Rodriguez play on in the top line, Tarasenko too. So it's mostly for the Panthers, they see it as two top lines. Just you got to put 1 and 2 to it. So and Lundell, the way he's stepped up, being better on the pucks, supporting his teammates, he's making a case for a decent enough bridge deal coming up this summer.
And before we get to some stats, predictions, remind me, did the Panthers make any significant additions prior to the trade deadline? I'm trying to remember.
Vladimir Tarasenko and Kyle Okposo.
Right.
Those are the two. Those are the two ones that the Panthers added. And Kyle Okposo, he was part of a few big goals in Game 3 where they battled for the puck, got it to the point, and then they scored a goal. And same thing with Steven Lawrence too, which they traded in the offseason. He's not a trade deadline, but he was an offseason acquisition for Anthony Duclair, and he stepped up big. One of the nicest guys out there that you'll find too. For Steven Lawrence. So you got to be definitely happy for him in his career, because his hockey career goes all the way back to the ECHL, even though it wasn't the Panthers affiliate at the time. But also, by the way, you mentioned Mason Lohrei and state of Louisiana. Shout out to formerly the New Orleans Brass of the ECHL from when they existed. So maybe a little bit of hockey influence there for Mason Lohrei in his career. But so those are some of the big additions that the Panthers had for them. And Vladimir Tarasenko, he scored on the power play in I believe it was Game 1 or 2, one of the home games early. So and special teams, which let's discuss special teams in segment number 3. Let's continue that conversation there. But
before we did move on, I did want to mention Pat Maroon, Big Rig. He was a big influential voice for the Bruins in the first round. He was one of their big acquisitions. But shout out to Kevin Shattenkirk, who was signed in the offseason, who apparently came through big with the speech prior to Game 7, getting the guys to embrace the moment. Some veterans. It's always interesting to see those kind of veteran guys who step in, and Okposo, Tarasenko, Maroon, Shattenkirk among them. Coming up, we're going to discuss some key stats, probably look at some special teams, make our series predictions, and we'll discuss all that here as this preview episode continues. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You've already talked about this, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. We got to touch on it again. For example, in Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get, like unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings. There's also some very cool mini games like digging for treasure, even a robot pachinko machine. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go. All right, Armando, let's get into the numbers. What are some key stats from round one or from the regular season that stand out for the Florida Panthers?
Yeah, I mean, in round one, it was really about the fact that the Panthers didn't seem bothered when Steven Stamkos scored on the power play. Really, the only one who was really effective. I mean, in game one, it was a garbage goal in the last minute for them when Stamkos scored. But I mean, looking at the numbers for the Boston Bruins, I mean, only allowing, I believe it was one power play goal against the Toronto Maple Leafs in round one. Yep. And, looking back at last year, the one number that stood out to me is when the Panthers escaped that series, not saying that they didn't deserve to win, but escaped with a 59% penalty kill against the Boston Bruins in their round one series last year and still found a way to win. I mean, the Boston Bruins power play is like they're looking quite dangerous for going into this series. I mean, 35% going into this one where their PK is 95. But the Panthers, I mean, their 5-on-5 play has just been phenomenal. They're +4 and looking at Boston, I'm looking at it right now, -1 at 5-on-5. But the difference, I mean, and thankfully for the Bruins, they didn't waste a great Jeremy Swayman series. That's the thing. That's something I'm taking the words out of Ray Ferraro from the ABC broadcast. They didn't waste a great performance by them. So I believe for on the Boston Bruins side of thing, 5-on-5 scoring is definitely going to be something keying in that they have to key in for them. We know what Pasternak can do. I mean, Marchand, who would have thought that 10 plus years ago when he first made the Stanley Cup final in the early 2010s and all the suspension that he had, that he would just not only be the captain, but take the lead for Boston in 2024 too. So 5-on-5 play is definitely going to be that sticks out to me for the Panthers, because they're okay on both ends of special teams. I mean, you definitely, I want to see more out of Sam Reinhart. 3 goals, no assists, but I want to see more on special teams for him. So that's one that for me, I think is going to be the difference maker as far as like if it's going to help the Panthers ultimately win the series, because I said that the Panthers had probably the forward advantage. Boston might have a slight advantage as far in blue line for them. I mean, we see Nico Mikkola jump into the rush sometimes, and too much of an aggressive pinch. Sometimes we see Kulikov deliver a little bit of a pizza. We know he's an offensive defenseman too, but the goaltending, I think it's a push for these two. I mean, the good thing for the Florida Panthers, they only got to see probably one goaltender. You can't play both of them.
Probably, yeah.
Jim Montgomery definitely learned from last year and knowing when to make the switch. But it looks like that it's going to be both teams are going to go into this with one guy, and that's really the difference between these two series. So I think special teams is really going to make a big difference this time around.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you mentioned the Bruins special team stats. They hadn't been playing very well on the power play to end the regular season. That's one of the reasons why they dropped back in the standings, but they were great at key moments against the Maple Leafs. Only the Edmonton Oilers had a better penalty kill in round one. They didn't allow a power play goal against the Kings, I believe. And while the Bruins, they struggled to score 5-on-5. I think their shooting percentage was like 6.67. Thankfully, Toronto's was a bit less at 6.59.
That's a lot of shots.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think it will come down to goaltending. You mentioned the game one starters. We know the only way Linus Ullmark gets in this series is if Jeremy Swayman gives up 5 in a game, maybe, and I don't see that happening at this time, but you never know what's going to happen. The one stat that jumps out to me as well, I mentioned it earlier, is that the regular season record between these two teams. The Bruins, they matched up very well against the Leafs in the regular season. They matched up pretty well against the Panthers in the regular season. Obviously, the playoffs are a completely different ball game, and so much has changed over the course of the regular season. But I think having beaten the Leafs and knowing that, they faced that possibility of coughing up that lead again and blowing it all. The fact that they were able to get over that hump, and really this could be seen as a more successful season as last year because they're in the second round. Nobody expected much from this team. It's a transition year. They're kind of playing with house money. I think even if they lose to Florida, it will still be seen as a positive step forward in this transition year. And the fact that they played very well against the Panthers in the regular season could give them a bit more of a boost as well. When it comes to picking a winner, how long do you think this series is going to go, Armando, and who do you think is going to come out on top?
It's funny because when you look at every single game that the Florida Panthers played against the Boston Bruins, every single game was close. Two overtime losses for them. Just discussing the Bruins as observing them all, and the different, and for the Panthers, I mean, when it gets to overtime, they don't lose. They right now they're 11 straight wins in overtime. Going all the way back to the last time they lost in overtime was in 2016 in Game 6 against the New York Islanders, the famous Trocheck was tripped game.
Right.
And it's crazy because there was a lot of and for the one game that was fairly close for the Panthers, where they just blew a lead at home on the 26th. I mean, it was a low event game, 21 and 21 on shots on goal for both teams. I mean, for in this series, I think it's going to be ugly. I think it's going to be low scoring. I think we're going to see 1-0, 2-1 games. It's going to be, you're really going to fight for that greasy goal, a lucky bounce that might need to go your way for them. But for the Panthers, I mean, 5-on-5, they versus what we saw with 3-on-3 overtime this season. I think the Panthers really do have that advantage for them over the Boston Bruins, and the center depth for them, Barkov, possibly Bennett back, Lundell. I think it's just a big mismatch that the Panthers are. I believe they are gonna really that they have that advantage in. So I think for this series, I think that the Panthers are going to win this one in 7. They're going to clinch it at home. Last year, my prediction was Bruins in 5, but like I was happy to be wrong there.
Almost happened, yeah.
But hey, I mean, hey, look at this. It's funny because the Bruins and the Panthers both had big saves towards the end of their games. That their Bobrosky's came in against Marchand in Game 5, and Swayman's came in Game 7 right before overtime. So
true.
Hey, who knows what kind of a storybook ending it could be for either side of this for both teams. But I'm gonna say Panthers in 7. They're gonna win this at home, and I think that the Panthers are gonna make their second straight Eastern Conference final. How about you?
I mean, that's very possible, very realistic. I think the only way the Bruins are able to win this series is if Swayman continues to play like he has, and if those two centers who I mentioned earlier, Coyle, Zaka, show up and contribute offensively. I mean, there's a reason why the Panthers went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. There's a reason why they finished first in the Atlantic. This is a very good team, and I've said this a lot lately that, this is a very good squad that is built to contend for the Stanley Cup. My head and my heart kind of going back and forth. My heart, I want to say Bruins in 7. Just I think it could go the distance, like you mentioned. I'm probably leaning to more towards Panthers in 6. I just think they're a better team. They're deeper up front, and the only way it's going to be Bruins in 7 is if it's a kind of a repeat of what happened with Jeremy Swayman stepping up. I think it's going to be, like you mentioned, a very close series. It's going to be low scoring, physical. It's going to be scrum after the whistle. It's going to be pretty entertaining, I think. I do feel the Bruins have a chance. I think according to Money Puck, it's like a 66% chance in favor of the Panthers at the moment. But the way Swayman's been playing, I wouldn't count them out by any stretch. It's going to be a good long series, I think. And yeah, may the better team win. There's no shame in losing to a contender like the Panthers. It would have been a lot tougher if the Bruins ended their season losing to a pretender like the Toronto Maple Leafs, for sure. Armando, always great to catch up and chat. Where can people find Locked On Panthers and your coverage of this team?
They can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at @LO_FLA Panthers. And yeah, they'll be seeing my live tweets all throughout the games and me cutting a little bit of video from media and YouTube shorts as far as post game stuff, and of course post game shows, and they can follow me there. How about for my audience? What where can they find you online?
The podcast is Locked On Boston Bruins at Locked NHL Bruins on X and Instagram. People can find me at Ian C. McLaren. And be posting shorts after every game, any breaking news updates, and definitely looking forward to this series. Armando, may the better team win. And any parting shots?
Best of luck, my friend.
Yeah, you as well. Always good to catch up. And let's just hope it's a good, long, fair, clean series. And go teams. All right, Armando, take care, and we'll catch up sometime in the future, I'm sure.
Thank you.